Yeah, I'm going to put in the thing about the Sox and Goldman posse symbol. I include Zildjian A custom, yeah, the posse symbol. Um, thing about the gold digging papuska thing, the the thing about the gold rush, um, in that way because of um, Sox and Goldman, um, involving the Wyatt Earp pasty symbol, pasty symbol, as a matter of fact, and the Mugu Gai Pan. There's something about the um, Mugu Gai Pan and the pan. Yeah, um, sometimes the pan in um, panoramic view is normally the extent of the peripheral, sometimes called panning. In any case, um, the Mugu Gai Pan, the pan that was used like for, you know, looking for gold in a river, pretty much the pan. In any case, yeah. So there was some real information um that was given in a way with the exclusionary rule provision and the pi r squared, um and what the line is to the rule, um or maybe even a transaction to bank involving endorsements, or what the radius as compared to the diameter and the pi r squared would really mean to participation, or what a silent partnership in business law might suggest, or even a vantage love 30, something I'm looking at about vantage being, like 70 in secret, or better, or there's something about the thing about vantage love 30 that I've been looking at. Also the three-pointer, um comparable, the three-pointer in basketball, being, the 3 point, like, with one shot, or the deuce, um score resulting in 3 points, determining, the results of the game, possibly the winning point, ultimately originating from having to achieve a deuce, um, um, that normally involves three separate scores, getting to the deuce, and then the one um, extra point to be the winning point to win the game. So I'm like looking at that as far as principal interchangeability. What that means, in the way of whether or not, if any type of forfeiture in the way of proper English grammatical composition involving, once again, yes, why one type of pronoun cannot be used as a subject um, of the four types of pronouns. Anyway, if that reflects the truth of admitting factors of the freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and the Fifth Amendment, or no self-incrimination, or any benefit of um, protection that would present maybe what a silent partner may or may not be, or as an option, um, complementary feature, or maybe granted in the way of not having to integrate or be obligated in any kind of way to provide information, um, whether it's involving they themselves or like anyone, or if the information that might be given might be whether other factors involving maybe potentially a misperception of whether knowing before, during, and after is a factor of even answering any question. Um, and when, you know, the court actually provides that for like a juvenile, or, when I say that underage, if it really gets to the point of, the exclusionary rule provision, or a pi r squared, or a leave of absence of what underage means, or, the same principle of like espionage, the age, underage. I mean, is it really a leave of absence of just like syllables, underage? Hmm. So if it's the ESP, extrasensory perception ion age, would that be like, the exclusionary rule in pi r squared? I mean, only half the line is really being used to find the entire. It's almost like a two-syllable word, or maybe even a three, a fill in the blank type of a, like, underage. I mean, doesn't really have to be an age group to the sense of what banking really truthfully is. I mean, anyone that doesn't have like that level of degree of international banking, international financial management, or degreed levels of like how commerce affects whether or not dictating any importing, exporting, or any reserve in the way is on or offshore, and what commerce is to um, a banking system, or what underage would even constitute of being responsible, or an inadequacy, um, potentially, whether or not if competency is the issue, or maybe just what's involved with the options is a geographical area. In any case, resulting in a managing factor because of an inadequacy. And if underage is not really about an age group, it's obviously a level of banking. It's truthfully ultimately what it gets to. So something about a juvenile is really not limited to like some people's minds of being underage, as normally the standard would normally been given as information as like 18 years of age. Um, in a way of like even 18 being like ahead, and same of like a pi r squared, or an exclusionary rule provision, fill in the blank of a headquarter. Um, yeah, truthfully so. So I mean, if it ultimately gets to whether or not the being underage, it's like everyone being accused of being a juvenile for even being in a bank, or what a national deficit is to availability, um, available in closed caption for the hearing impaired, or what international law dictates as having fair use of an access easement, um, and what that means to being underage, and what categorization of fair is fair use. Um, is it in an entire banking system? Ultimately, I mean, as naive as it may seem, maybe thorough disregard of an entire employment history, or an executive live on air current event of any retroactive participation of an entire, you know, live on air deposition, or legal media in a way of like, I mean, is it available in closed caption to the effectiveness of, is it really live or Memorex, or a national deficit in a way of what the accusation of being underage is, suggesting that the protection is based upon an inadequacy. Well, maybe so, maybe not at all. Maybe completely the opposite in that way. So I mean, if it's ultimately getting to something about the religious issues, like like a Jew, the Nile, or like some chosen elect of God being a Jew, or a VIN number of like a vehicle identification number, uh, and like an issue of like uh, the Nile, juvenile, like a river. And I was just discussing a little earlier, maybe it might involve maybe the triangle of what Nile is to Egypt, or a pyramid, or the pi r square factored of like the exclusionary rule provision of only one triangle, um, in the sense of like Christianity in like an American and English speaking um, religious issues involving Israel being two triangles, or the delta force, normally in schematics and symbolic representation. In schematics, the triangle is most definitely a symbolic representation of a delta. And with the river being like um, the mouth of a river is identified as a delta, coming in from a gulf or an ocean, inland in that way. Um, and if that's really all it means to Egypt, and that U.S. dollar, U.S. $1, being the pyramid, or Nile, and all that being a banking transaction being accused of being underage and, a grown adult their entire life, every generation of families. Um, I mean, for real, might not even know they're being accused of being underage or even a juvenile, if they even qualify to be anything religious in that way to begin with, or even see themselves as Christians, or know, or whether they accept it or deny it, approve of it or agree to it, or whether they like it or not, or whatever. I mean, ultimately, when a person gets to studying alphanumerics and they find the U-151, or mental telepathy minus God equals like Jesus Christ, Sacred Service, and Holy Spirit. Um, I've mentioned it before. I would like to think that being some powerful way, some kind of, you know, complimentary thing about them being, humored at least by a subliminal message minus 26, whether it be a God, game, or lie, or whatever. In any case, um, really. So, huh. Anyway, in any case, yeah. So, um, when it gets to that mental telepathy, um, in that way, the alphanumerics of like a 177 minus 26 being 151. And it's not limited to like mental telepathy, but spiritually, as far as that symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1 of like a new copies above the pyramid. Um, to me, it's also representative of the spirit of adoption, or a telepathic, spiritually gifted type of communication as a mediation. Um, to me personally, that's exactly what it is, and something about representation as well, even maybe comparable. Um, you know, um, during fertility, of when the cell divides into like identical twins before birth. Yeah, and anatomy, and just the production. I don't like even using the reproduction. Uh, it's like I've mentioned. Sometimes it's like it's almost an identity crisis of terminology. Uh, not even realizing that. So you're not the main show of like the production. You're a reproduction. Oh my god. Oh, you're one of those reproduced, replicated kind of like things, right? No, but anyway, so like I'm not real thrilled about sometimes even talking about reproduction in the sense of whether if authenticity is like really an issue as an individual, or some degree credentials that have achieved and acquired some like valued standard as a status worldwide. I mean, like, for real. Okay. So anyway, um yeah, for real. So in any case, yeah, so it seems to be like whether or not if that delta force, um I mean, you'll see it in military books like the delta force. um yeah, so I mean, it's like the mouth thing. It ultimately gets to the river, and ultimately, anyone who studies it is ultimately going to get to the point of the mouth of the river, and what the Nile is to a juvenile, or what underage really means. In the, I don't know how true it is with like the entire United States. Maybe in the Houston, Texas, maybe similarities of Los Angeles and New York, whatever the case may be. Although the delta, the biggest mouth of North America, being like the Mississippi, is still the mouth, involving schematics and electronic power, and symbolic representation of a triangle. Um, and ultimately, I finally have, I put some, after both my mother and father passed away, I've been putting a lot of time into like, music video. What truthfully, I've always been involved with, like, just practicing my drums and singing here at the house. But, I've like invested a lot into music instruments, and recording, live as well as post production, and recording in video, and lighting, and a considerable amount with PA systems, and power amps, and signal processors, and mixing boards, and all that stuff. So in any case, I've been really, trying to set up a real serious and try and get it done as fast as possible. I felt the need to like just get it up, something on there as soon as possible, kind of situation. So I'm probably gonna go back and like thoroughly like make it. I mean, as perfect as possible. Um, which really isn't a problem. It's just that a lot of the songs that I do have on there is like really. I don't know if I'm gonna do like more than 3,000, but really, I mean, that's not a problem. The thing with it is that some of the songs that I've like put on there is like I haven't even practiced for like 10, 15 years, and sometimes I mean I just like know the compact disc and the song and throw it in just like start playing on some of it, and normally I don't even have a problem remembering like not one thing and remember like virtually everything about it. So I mean, it's one of those things that I don't worry about because everything like that I do. I mean, I'm sure I've practiced like all of them as a whole during my entire life. That it's been like really more than hundreds of thousands of times with all of them combined. Plus, during the time they were like spending putting a lot of time in each individual and staying on it, for a considerable amount of time, to this day. But anyway, getting to my original music is my point, but also likewise a versatility as well as a very good portfolio on like YouTube.com on my channel Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY. Yeah, in that way, and like I'm actually talking and putting in some verbal presentations about directions I focus my attention to in a lot of ways that I didn't plan on. It's happening that way. And my first intent at the beginning was that wasn't going to happen, but it is now. In any case, so I'm including a little bit of this as well in that way. So I mean, ultimately, it gets to whether or not if the pyramid is reflecting something about the pi r squared, when everyone knows that really truthfully, um, if it's really getting to the religious issue of Christianity or um, maybe an issue of real estate, excuse me, or proper English grammatical composition, what actual participation um, really means in proper, past, present, and future, first, second, and third person, um, first, second, and third world, and um, um, not have the accusation of, um, and whether or not if it's can or will be a complementary feature of what many people might not ever realize or see or believe, if not maybe denied by bankers they themselves of what usury really is. It's truthfully probably maybe intended to be a compliment somewhere along the line. Um, in any case, it's kind of like international law, and it really is international law about having fair use of access easements, and not limited to really, truthfully, national security, but it's also supposed to be about a degree level that in circuitry that having access has always been, not that it has to be an excuse, and whether if it has to be an excuse just to be in a compliment and not an excuse, or I mean it doesn't always have to be a national security issue involving um, anything other. I mean, it doesn't have to be incriminating to the effectiveness of what no self incrimination means, um, to the Fifth Amendment, or what freedom of speech and freedom of the press of the U.S. Uh, Constitution that ratifies and codifies amending factors in that way with the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press, or what having fair use of access easements means, and equal employment opportunity, some alignment in a parallel universe, kind of like issue of is it live or Memorex, or is it like um, simulcast, live on air, current events as compared to maybe an archive and retroactive present current time, you know, some Nostradamus prediction, right? Uh, yeah, for real. Anyway, so yeah, for real. So that could be a something to have a whole new approach, and maybe where the real experience really exists. I mean, there's experience and there's experience, and how does a person want to use the information that they have um, to choose maybe what they may have maybe chosen before had they known certain issues, and how living life really and what it really means in that way, or or if it's really going to be to a degree level of anyone's explanation to support how legitimate or not legitimate, or whether or not if enforcing anything about it, attaching any code or any legal terminology, or feeling the need of any uh, legal media or deposition in a way of how it's so used all the time at the bank. It's amazing. It's amazing. Even insurance claims. Um, uh, Truthfully so. And it really ultimately gets to, like really uh, does Washington D.C. claim, or any grant any reality to, like, hey, like, where do you go for, like, accomplishing all this, and not, require, uh uh 175,000 a year position, including travel, just to go all around to coordinate accomplishing, the circuit of that kind of freedom, and wealth and power, and maintain it, and still get paid for actually doing it, or what some people, whether they even admit it, whether they want to choose the word constitute, um, donations. Um, they choose not to use um, registered charities. They choose the word donations in that way. This normally because somewhere along the lines later on, with political advertisement, and that's the thing about proper English grammatical composition, um, is that they will eventually throw in the registered charity of what they're involved with, and not at the same time during normally campaigning for office or position, and only request that you give a willing donation. They don't choose to give a willing registered charity because most people don't see themselves sometimes, because they don't have that degree level of international financial banking, or international financial management, or international banking, to see themselves even involved as a registered charity or an accusation of a DBA. Normally, at a degree level, is automatically a database administration, not necessarily just an endorsement or some defective signature and just walking away from the bank teller's window, and maybe a thorough accusation of a defector or a leave of absence, or in need of managing factors other than their own, and thoroughly disregarded as insignificant, as if their participation would not be even meeting the requirements to go any further at that point. And somewhere there's probably that exact accusation of, like, what a juvenile is to being underage. And if only being underage is even being seen in the bank, um, and the "in God we trust" with the U.S. dollar, well, then everyone's a juvenile, right? A child of God, right? Yeah, yeah, really. So, like, where's the retroactive presidential administration that goes beyond, the first runner up, and the nativity points of origin, Goma? Yeah, yeah, for real, and um, so get smart, get Maxwell smart, pile, yeah, yeah. So yeah, for real. So yeah, in that way. So great. Anyway, so if it ultimately gets to whether or not if the pi r squared and exclusionary rule provision would only suggest whether or not if a live, active presidential administration, as compared to any before, during, and after type of presidential administration, whether it be retroactive, based upon whether or not if pi r squared is a factor of exclusionary rule provision, and what that means in proper English grammatical composition, or why one pronoun cannot be used as a subject of the four types of pronouns, and what that means to the Fifth Amendment if self-incrimination is only a manufactured issue, distinguishing whether or not if a silent partnership in business law only equates to whether or not if annuity involving what could be in a blink of an eye involving a corporate venue, if not corporate law itself. or distinguishing factor between the note being, legal tender for all debt, both public and private, and distinguishing whether or not if a degree level of terminology is only going to be whether or not if a citing, quoting, annotation is only going to reflect, um, where the information and potential easement of what international law of having fair use is. And if the only real accusation of what fair use is just being seen in the bank as a monetary categorization or a potential placement issue, and what the aggregates mean in that way, um, of like domestic monetary and gross national product. I mean, if those are the M1, 2, and 3, and there's like 7 remaining, the Statue of Liberty's got those 7. Looks like spikes now. Earlier, the first design, when I really first noticed, they were shaped considerably more like a telepathic teepee, a real Native American Indian thing, in my mind, of like pylons and cones. Even the bewildered Native American Indian, it's like a wild thing, um, a wild thing in Native management. Although as American as it gets, they were actually identified as being like here first. Um, Truthfully so. I mean, as a nativity point of origin, but yeah, like a Gomer Pyle. Yeah, yeah, telepathic CP. Yeah, yeah, some calculus genius, and bartering, trading, beef jerky and some highlighting characterization on the Calvary's plane. Anyway, so yeah, so that's the way I see it. Is that if ultimately the national anthem is virtually anyone as a third person or considered owned based upon that fact of categorization as intellectual, and what international law is to having fair use to access easement. Um, it's like really getting organized in my mind. I mean, really, my father passed away in May of 2018. This is fixing to be. This is December of 2021. So it's been like about 2.5 years, and I've been really slowly taking my time as far as like my verbal presentations about really truth a lot of things that I'd chosen to direct my attention to and towards based upon going through a circuit, um, in that way of seeing it as every potential valued thing about the on-site location, even like ponds and reserves and monetary, the aggregates, and like the M1, M2, and M3 of like monetary, domestic, and gross national product, and with the 7 layers of the atmosphere, or the 7 spikes, what was then in my mind an automatic all-American Indian thing of the Statue of Liberty and the pylon and the telepathic teepee thing, and teepee being 36 like a chase thing, the subconstant is minus chase, or even a teepee being 36 in the way of equating to like 181 Houston, Texas, we international electronic power, and a whole lot of stuff. Ultimately getting to Alphanumerics USA, Paraline Texas Home, Paraline USA, and Purple Heart USA, and a bunch of USA stuff and homes. Um, Ultimately getting to a lot of things. So I get to the point to where putting time in this way and direction as you know um something very much of my interest. I mean, look at it as going that direction, and and involved in a way, as far as like entertainment, that will obviously be a lot of people in that way are already at that level, whether if amendments are even the accusation of a constitution, a result of constitutional law. and whether or not normally constitutional law of amending factors involving annotation as a result of ratifying and codifying would be like the first time of like whether or not if a more disciplined um, principle prioritized direction deviated into the liquid equity. And automatically, like when I hear that word curriculum, it's automatically something like in my mind what liquid equity is as to categorization, even underage issues in need of management. If it's liquid equity, although as productive as it may seem, what that means as an overabundant amount, and whether that is even being used or of any benefit, even having any intellectual hold or claim on it, unless it's actually used, whether it's used as liquid equity or refined, modified, and used in a more productive way to get above the accusation of categorization actually itemized and identified as a major factor of participation, not necessarily a disregard of insignificance, no matter what the value is, although a reserve maybe a third person issue that goes beyond maybe an accusation of what intellectual is. And normally intellectual sometimes involves appreciation or depreciation in real estate, or even in entertainment, for as long as it lasts type of duration, or what royalties of mineral rights really means in copyright um, and airtime, um, to bands and musicians, production, or what airtime really means, um, as far as like sales, um, and royalties and mineral rights comparable to you know normally, according to the information that I've been hearing in my entire life and reading, is normally 50 years is an automatic royalty level for any musician, band singer, for like any you know um, hit that has made it. Um, and I don't think everything is discussed about how that is actually achieved or accomplished. If that involves like um, any live on air issues, or if really an archive division is really used as a current event in the way of a different means of like what participation means, um, as compared to maybe what normally would be maybe a right to assemble in the way of like concerts, or what airtime might mean, just like with the tracking system and um, word of mouth of what ratifying, codifying constitutional law is, and what it's always been, and not necessarily that has to be an accusation of um, something like Richard Nixon involving eavesdropping, the accusation of eavesdropping in the way of like Watergate, when in fact constitutional law, how true, the color code obviously for constitutional law, how true if it's like only focusing towards family law, or the black dot on the map, which is like virtually every family in North America, whose name is somewhere on North American continent, or at least the English speaking world. In any case, predominantly, I'm assuming that virtually the whole mass majority of like American, like U.S. citizens' family names are like either a black dot or have like grown into the flourishing colors and what space exploration means to a black dot, um, or even various state of Texas statutes annotated to a color code, um, and what constitutional law is or is not to a black color code, um, which is also a black book. I thought somewhere in my mind I thought I saw a different color involving constitutional law, but I mean I've had pretty much the color code of black when I like was like reading it and looking at it. It's predominantly like the Virgin State Texas statutes annotated, and I'm assuming that any state statute annotated is going to be black, based upon the black dye of the map. And firstly, it looks like it involves more so family law in a constitutional way of ratifying and codifying, and maybe the having fair use of access easement of and not even realize um, maybe what the experience is, or even know it, or would even believe it, even if they thought that was happening, involving the freedom of speech, freedom of press, or the Fifth Amendment, no self-incrimination, or what that means to an equal employment opportunity, or even it's not supposed to be identity theft, is it? Or is it really an accusation of like a registered charity through default by ignorance, not going beyond the bank teller's window after a check is endorsed, or even know what the accusation is beyond that point, and a thorough disregard, not assuming maybe the accusation of a defector seeking amnesty, as if it was like almost incriminated just to go through the bank teller window. I mean, for real? You gotta be kidding me. Would it be too late to say? Really? I mean, you say that now? Really? Kidding? Excuse me? Excuse me. Yeah, right. Monetary, yeah. So, like, it gets to the Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments of, like, SOX compliance, of, like, real itemization, going, through the categorization of monetary or aggregates in the way of, like, proving monetary, whether the right to assemble was, like, a demanded participation or an accusation of willingness before, during, and after, based upon what aggregate is to some sort of managing factors of enforcement. How true to the extent of enforcement it goes, whether or not that's going to be some accusation continually of whether or not if a breach is only an issue of still banking, or whether or not if an acronym is going to be a degree level of whether or not if citizenship and birthrights is going to be a factor, if any at all, based upon the situation and circumstances. If birthrights and citizenship is going to be whether or not if the whole entire accusation of potentially a threat to national security. It's the whole entire thing. And, it's kind of like when I talk that the acronym FBI or Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's like federal is like automatically a U.S. dollar word. Foreign Bureau Intelligence. I mean, the acronym, in a blink of an eye, can just doesn't have to be, it's always going to be an excuse of like, the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, even the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, an excuse of a national security issue of whether or not if the U.S. dollar is going to be possibly accused for manufacturing geographic options of questionable behavior. Or consumption, or discipline degreed decision making capability, a breach within degreed format. Would that include alumni, degreed graduate alumni? It's the word alumni anyway. For real. Is it ultimately getting to the sorority and fraternity issue of whether anyone should even believe whether or not if living on a university's campus it really has anything to do with a sorority or fraternity?